please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
The central government has turned the heat on bankers after the CBI's charge sheet in the Nirav Modi fraud case, which was filed today. In that 7,500-page charge sheet, which names 23 individuals, 3 entities, including the prime accused Nirav Modi, the investigative agency has booked the former managing director and CEO of Punjab National Bank, Usha Anand Subramaniam. She is now the managing director and CEO of Allahabad Bank. The charge sheet has also named 2 executive directors of Punjab National Bank, KV Brahmaji Rao and Sanjeev Sharan. After the CBI filed the charge sheet, the central government initiated disciplinary action against these bankers and has asked the respective bank boards to divest them of their roles. Now, following the government's nudge, the PNB board today has sacked the 2 executive directors named by the CBI in that charge sheet. In fact, speaking to me, Financial Services Secretary Rajiv Kumar has vowed, and I quote, strong action against errant bankers. Listen in.
This is the clear message.
Action initiated.
That we have to be responsible for what we do, and we will only do action whenever there is a substantial proof, not that one can start on rumors or something. So we gave sufficient time to understand, to investigate who is responsible, who is not responsible, whose fault, how much fault. And thereafter, the day we came to know that this is what it is, the action initiates on the same day. I just got a message from my director who is sitting in the PNB board, and he has moved that agenda, and board has decided to divest EDs of functional and financial responsibilities, and have also requested government to replace them. The Allahabad Bank director we have instructed, he will request for a meeting of the board, emergency meeting of the board, and they will decide what they have to decide. They feel what is best for them.
Well, that is Rajiv Kumar, the Financial Services Secretary. It's very, very unusual. At least that's the first that I've seen, that a decision taken by a bank board is actually communicated on live television in the manner in which it was this afternoon when the Punjab National Bank board decided to take action against the 2 executive directors that have been named in that 7,500-page charge sheet that was filed today. Joining us now to take this discussion forward, Ashwin Parekh of Ashwin Parekh Advisory Services, Sandeep Parekh of FinSec Law Advisors, also with me, banking editor Lata Venkatesh. Appreciate you all joining us here on the show. Mr. Parekh, let me start by asking you, I mean, I found that extremely unusual, the Financial Services Secretary on live television reading out an SMS that he got from Punjab National Bank officials telling them that the 2 executive directors' disciplinary action had been initiated against them because their names had been filed in that CBI charge sheet. But overall, what do you make of the developments of today?
Well, I mean, I must say that when, he started his interview, he did mention that the action would have happened without substantive proof. So, I mean, we have to really go by that, like quite clearly honor that, accept that. In such a situation, it's a little different compared with, I mean, to the extent that if there was enough evidence to suggest that despite the irregularities, and there are 2 or 3 sets of irregularities we are talking about in case of Nirav Modi case. Most was that despite very clear instructions from the regulator's office that the SWIFT account had to be linked to the general account, to the ledger, it was not carried out by the bank. And then the second important irregularity was that the credit continued to flow to his account till the whole thing unfolded, and suddenly it was found that there was a huge scam behind it. So I suppose it's a different case compared to, but yes, it does create a lot of heat on the bankers now, to the extent that even the senior executives will have to get into anything that was observed by either vigilance or by the regulator's office, any irregularity, and try and really see what are the implications and see how best they have to be plugged, and that too on an emergency and an urgent scale.
Sure. To the point that you were making, that this was a circular that was issued by the Reserve Bank in 2016. And to be fair, we don't have access to all 7,500 pages of that charge sheet. This is sketchy information that we do have. But the charge against Usha Anant Subramaniam is that action was not taken basis the RBI circular. But is that complicity or is it negligence? As I pointed out, we don't have enough information with us at this point in time to state unequivocally whether the investigative agency has been able to prove that there has been complicity, or is this a case of negligence? Sandeep, let me come to you with that. We now have the central government saying that we will follow through with more action against more bankers, and bankers are going to be replaced, and errant bankers, the conclusion of whatever action needs to be taken will be taken forward. What do you make of the charge sheet, and what could be the consequences, intended and unintended, of the action?
Hey, Shri. So first of all, Mr. Parekh is confusing today because we are two of us. On the banking, I think that, charge sheet means that it's kind of reached the final stage of investigation. So fact-finding is really over, and now the case will move to the judiciary. And, obviously, none of us have seen or are likely to read those 7,500 pages of evidence which they presented. But I think now the battle will move to the courts. But I think they're sending a very strong signal that, in a matter of weeks, they've finalized the charge sheet, which itself is quite an achievement. But I think people want to kind of draw blood, and they want to see action against people. Whether these people are innocent or guilty, only time will tell, and a court will decide that. But I think the message is pretty clear that swift action will be taken. But what I would additionally want to see is not just the top of the banks, but also the bureaucrats and politicians who probably made the calls which resulted in those bad loans. I think it should not stop at banks, but the entire pyramid should be investigated very thoroughly.
Sure. Lata, you've been speaking with bankers not just today, but, over the course of the last few months since the Nirav Modi scandal broke out, so to speak. I want to pick up on the point that Sandeep made, that obviously we want each of these developments to reach their logical conclusion. But the tendency to want to draw blood, so to speak, what is that going to mean as far as the banking system is concerned, per se?
Okay, well, I think we have to, take this naming of the PNB MD's name in this charge sheet different from, say, the Aircel case where other bankers, where an FIR was filed. Here, what they are saying is that the Reserve Bank, what they appear to say, again, I haven't read the 7,500 pages, from what our reporter tells us, is that there was an operational risk if the SWIFT was not connected to the CBS. And the Reserve Bank told the banks in August 2016, reminded them in November 2016, and in spite of it, that was not attended to by the managing director. And so she bears moral responsibility for someone exploiting this loophole. Up until then, at least you can claim that nobody knew about it. But here, a risk was mentioned on paper, and it was still not attended to. Therefore, this is dereliction or negligence. But what I really want to know is that I don't think there is so far any evidence of complicity. I mean, after all, the crime has been perpetrated over 7 years, and a person who was in charge for 20 months has been, named. That's clearly pointing out to the fact that we told you to check this loophole and you didn't check. So you are being moved against or punished or will be penalized for dereliction of duty. And that is what I want to ask Sandeep. Sandeep, if complicity is proved, at the moment it doesn't look like it is a corruption charge, it is a failure of duty. We told you that and you didn't attend to it. Then what does the law say in terms of penalties?
So really, I mean, if you're looking at any of the criminal angles, including theft, misappropriation, etc., all of that would require a guilty mind, and from if it's merely based on not following guidance, which is negligence will never amount to fraud, really. So I don't think this will stick. I think they'll have to kind of go beyond and do further investigation to make sure that there are charges of actual corruption, and there's, that people
No,
have
but dereliction of duty can also be punished. I mean, what is the normal punishment in the law where you're not complicit, but you left the door open, you forgot to lock the door?
So it'll depend on what scale you're at. If it's negligence, then it will be, of course, dereliction duty would be kind of a civil charges. You can be thrown out if you're still holding office, etc.
Okay.
But it would not, normally it would not amount to fraud. But, if it's so gross, it's a matter of degree. For instance, if you're driving at 100 kilometers an hour in a crowded street, you can't say I did not commit murder, even though you did not intend to murder any specific set of people. So it'll depend on the degree, to be honest. But at the same time, if it's just non-compliance with circular, which is absolutely a very important circular because it would pave the way for many other even larger frauds. I think it could border between negligence and rashness, which is kind of the deciding factor.
Okay, let me go across to Mr. Parekh now. And Mr. Parekh, let's talk about the way forward, because what we are given to understand is that in some form or fashion, this issue, not the specific issue of Punjab National Bank, but this issue of the rot within the banking system, specifically with the public sector banking system, is going to be addressed in some form or fashion when the Reserve Bank meets, and both the Secretary of Economic Affairs as well as the Financial Services Secretary, who are part of the RBI board, will be there. Now, we've seen this back and forth between the government and the Reserve Bank. The Reserve Bank saying, look, you've got my hands tied. I have more control over private sector banks. I have no control over public sector banks. And the government lobbing the ball right back into the Reserve Bank's court saying, what were you doing? You were sleeping on the job. I mean, I'm not, maybe not quite literally, but to that effect. So what do you expect from here on now, Mr. Parekh, in this context?
Well, I mean, I would expect, to begin with, there are a few things which come out of this entire episode. One, of course, is that when a person, is removed from the kind of position in which he can defend himself, then for that person to collect any evidence, thereafter, and to submit it to the courts or to any proceeding that may happen from now on, does become very difficult. So to that extent, I would say my sympathy would go to all those officers, all the EDs, everybody, for that matter, who may have to vacate the seats now, and then the bank may or may not support them with providing them with the necessary evidence, whether there was any element of fraud or whether there was any element of connivance or otherwise. But leaving that aside, I would say, way forward from now, is that, now that we know that the banking system is really, totally turned upside down in a very, very pecuniary situation, to the extent that we're listening to, we're getting all NPAs, frauds, all sorts of news every day, which are very adverse to the sector bank in particular and banking in general. Then in that case, I suppose taking stern action would be the right thing to do. That's one. Second thing is, once again, if it is very clearly distinguished that beyond negligence, and the order of negligence also has to be understood, but beyond negligence, there was also an element of fraud or an intentional involvement, then of course there can be no excuse. There has to be severe punishment. It will send out fear in the bankers. By and large, I have realized that compared to all the stakeholders, the investigation agencies run after bankers first. The borrowers come a little later, and of course, board members and the politicians and everybody else may come much, much later or may not come into the investigation at all.
Sure. Right. Let me quickly go across to our colleague Sapna Das, who was speaking with the Financial Services Secretary. Sapna, the sense we get is that there is more that is coming. What, on the basis of the conversation that you've been having with your sources in government, what is your understanding?
Well, basically, no stone seems to be unturned in terms of the government being on a mission mode, especially the Department of Financial Services is absolutely on a mission mode as far as, quote-unquote, the cleaning up exercise in the public sector banks is concerned. And, the indications that we have got from the Secretary himself is the fact that, even 3 years ago, the exercise to an extent had started off at the DOPT level, when basically in terms of all the government appointments, no patronage, no lobbying, basically all the appointments being done completely on the merit and the integrity basis. Now, the same cleanup exercise has come to the banking sector. We have seen some of the announcements that have been made today, but this is not the last of what we are hearing about this. So in the next couple of months, we can expect, you know, if not more heads to roll, at least more of such investigations to be filed. So that's one. The second, we also are given to understand that the small borrowers should not be penalized. So what they're trying to indicate is that the junior management level of the of most of the banks probably is not involved. It's a senior management where most of the dirt is there. So that needs to be cleaned up. That's the second aspect. The third, of course, what happens to the small borrowers in terms of the lending operations.
I mean, if one just goes by the facts, Sapna, sorry I'm interrupting you, but if one goes by the fact, at least as far as the Punjab National Bank case is concerned, the matter in which the charge sheet has been filed today, it was junior level officers who were complicit in pulling off that LOU fraud.
Well, absolutely, Shireen, I would agree with you completely on that point, in fact, but one of the designations I think we are giving of Mr. Shetty is as Deputy General Manager. He was just a Deputy Manager, so that basically ties up with the point that you're trying to make. But overall, what the DFS is indicating is that possibly at the junior level, most of the staff is not involved. Probably one case has happened in terms of Punjab National Bank, and we have seen the action on that front, but mostly he's trying to give a clean sheet to the other staff of other banks. You really don't know, how clean that shit would be. But what he's trying to reach at is the fact that possibly the lending operations should not be hit. The kind of fear that is being raised in the industry. And on that perspective, he's very clear that this kind of cleaning up that's happening right now, more transparency will come in, and at least in terms of the lending processes for the retail segment, for the small borrowers, for the MSME, some further announcements will come on that front. The processes are going to be eased up. But as far as the senior management is concerned, DFS is completely on a mission mode, and I don't think this is going to end quickly.
7,500-page charge sheet being filed in the Punjab National Bank case today. Joining us to discuss that, Ashwin Parikh of Ashwin Parikh Advisory Services, Sandeep Parikh of FinSec Law Advisors, I know they're not related, and also our banking editor, Lata Venkatesh. Mr. Parikh, let me ask you, sir, about the point that Sapna raised, and that is a concern that a lot of people have, that is this now going to lead to a credit freeze? Is it going to impact lending operations? The government trying to allay those concerns and say, especially as far as the SME segment is concerned, or the retail segment is concerned, that will not be the case. But what do you believe?
Well, I mean, I must say that there are 2-3 things which are happening in the banking industry at the moment. One is, of course, good credit is hard to come by. I mean, that's one thing we have to recognize. Second thing is, I mean, the judgment element, somehow or the other, is getting gradually removed from banking, and it's going to be totally evidence-based kind of banking, which means even if you do want to extend any credit, and then progressive banks will continue to perhaps do that, but the amount of evidence they will collect at the time when they will extend that credit would really be much more than what we've seen in the past. I mean, both ways, not just to cover the risk, but also to cover, in some form or the other, the persons who are responsible for preparing those documents. So, I mean, it's going to be more of evidence-based kind of banking that we're going to see now. I suppose we've gone through this in the last 10 years. Poor quality, poor governance, a lot of investigations, I mean, in the past. I think the bankers have gone through all this. The business cannot stop, and as such as we are seeing that there is a gradual disintermediation in the banking system. As a savings mobilizer, bank is reducing its share given by mutual funds and by insurance companies. I suppose somehow or the other, and the government will have to restore that confidence in bankers. If there is adequate evidence, if they form more committees, more groups to really decide on credit, credit would flow, I suppose. But a lot of paperwork and then a backup kind of a cover papers will be prepared by bankers to make sure that later on when any investigation happens, they are ready to put out something,
Right. Lata, let me address the same question to you. And again, while we've been discussing this, that if there is a good, decent, viable, bankable project, it will find the money. But in general, if we continue to see, FIRs and charge sheets being filed against bankers, what is your sense? Because it will lead to some extent, to a crisis of confidence within the system, will it not?
No, of course, bankers are feeling the heat, very clearly. But, somebody has to take this responsibility. Technology is increasing exponentially. And, now there is BHIM and there is UPI. There is so much of technology that any one door can lead to fraud, hacking, swindling, heist like happened in the Bangladesh Central Bank. So, somebody has to own up for operation risks. And, this is like the charge on the managing director of the bank is something like, if somebody stole into our ticker desk and put out a ticker which resulted in the loss of, money to several people, then obviously the editor and the executive editor are held responsible for it. It is that kind of a problem. It's not that you're complicit, but this is an operation risk. And a lot more operational risk is going to come on the banking system because technology, financial technology is simply exploding on them. This is going to really scare them. Because now you will find bankers worrying about not just credit quality, but a whole lot of technology risks. I don't know how they will react. We really need bankers on the show. And let me tell you that we must have dialed about 24 bankers today. They didn't want to be on the show. Not even ex-bankers. They are so scared. I mean, it's clearly a scared lot. How they will... I don't blame the government for this. Somebody has to take the responsibility if the technology fails. And you better tighten and, bolt all the possible doors. Is the correct thing to say. Technology shall not fail us. But nevertheless, for the bankers, now they are being under the scanner for both credit quality, for decisions taken by probably courts, by bureaucracy, by politicians, as well as for technology risk, which they probably don't always understand. So yes, the heat is on them. But I really still want to ask Sandeep, what is the responsibility of a non-technocrat for a technology issue, which is what the SWIFT is in this specific case?
No, so my generic answer would be that not responsible. But I think in the
somebody has to take
case of this, exactly. So in the facts of this case, when somebody is stealing 13,000 crore rupees from your bank because you didn't have systems in place which were alerted by regulators time and again, I think it goes way beyond just simple negligence. As I said, negligence normally does not amount to fraud, but if it goes into a territory where it's so obviously going to result in massive losses to both the public exchequer and also to depositors indirectly. I think there has to be, as you said, there has to be some accountability.
No, Sandeep, this is not just a question of, Shireen, just to put it in, this has been happening for 7 years. And normally in banking, what has gone before, the succeeding manager just follows on. That, this happened before, so that person probably is handling. In this case, it's gone on happening. So perhaps, it's not, the banker is not so much at fault because the fraud has happened for 7 years and this one set of people, 3 people, were in charge for perhaps 20 months or so. So I really don't know how the courts will look at this one. Shireen?
Well, and as I said, we don't have access to the 7,500 pages of that charge sheet, so we'll reserve our comment on that. But Sandeep, since we have you, I want to go to the big CNBC TV18 exclusive news break. And what we are given to understand is that Manipal TPG has made a fresh offer for Fortis. This after the Fortis board had already announced that the Munjal Berman combine would be getting Fortis. Now we've seen Manipal and TPG make a fresh offer. Of course, shareholders will decide on the 22nd of May at the EGM. What do you make of it, Sandeep?